here is, I found this of interest. I don't know if you think this will be a total bore or not, but here he's sitting with the Sultana Jahan, who was also called the Begum of Bhopal. I don't know what that means precisely, other than it's a title. And she's wearing a veil. And Bhopal was unique among the Indian princely states in that it was ruled by a succession of widows who governed with the consent of their people and the British government. And I don't know, that's an interesting way of doing things. The widow runs the show. Edward was critical, to put it nicely, of the rude and rough way in which the British officials treated and dealt with the Indian people. The man was as anti-racist as you could possibly get. Any hint of it, any whiff of it, he did not tolerate. So he wrote home again to Mother, explaining all of this and what was happening, and his communications with the monarch, Queen Victoria, and his and her government resulted in at least one that I could find recall of a British official. You have to understand when you do this type of research, if you guys move on to a master's level or a doctoral, you have to pay good money, or your university has to give you a mighty big check to travel, to pay to get this kind of stuff. So, you know, this is the best that could be found on a budget. So one British official was recalled, Lord Salisbury, who was the new Secretary of State for India, issued new instructions also on how his officials treated the Indian people on the subcontinent. So not a bad day's work. So the return, though, to Britain, it was really more of the same, more racehorses, more operas, more women, more whatever he could do, and whatever he could find to keep himself occupied until Mother died and he ascended the throne on January 22nd, 1901. Now we come to the reign, which was only 9 years. Queen Victoria, who you can see there, the Victorians had a very different idea about death than we do now. This would have been on a postcard. In fact, I'm fairly sure this was on a postcard. Her and the bed she died in, and I mean, the flowers and everything. But she died, and as soon as she took her last breath, Edward became king, King Edward VII. So we're there now. And his first official act was to open Parliament, which he did about a month later. That's the coronation, not him opening Parliament. Sorry about that. So he showed himself in imperial splendor, which is why I chose that picture. Full royal regalia, driven in a state coach. He wore the imperial state crown, which was last seen in 1861. And this was a big deal because you have to realize that since the death of the Prince Consort, the Queen of the United Kingdom had been a recluse. She wouldn't go out. She wouldn't do anything. Her grief was to be respected, but her grief lasted the rest of her life. Famously wore black until, well, pretty much the day she died. So the king projected the image of a public monarch, much like we see today with the late Queen Elizabeth and King Charles. And he really threw himself into it, modernizing, reforming, and thought that, as Queen Elizabeth said, I have to be seen to be believed. He would go out, he would do his work, but he would also be seen to do his work. So opening, you know, whatever, visiting whatever opera house, I mean, he would be present.